Welcome back to 33-Year-Old Boomer Reacts to YouTube videos. The world has been built by autists. Let's talk about it. So sometimes YouTube graces me with a beautiful video, and I think that there is a very interesting conclusion to be drawn from this precise video that we're going to watch. It's about 3 minutes. We're going to watch through it, and I'm going to pause at certain moments, and I want to make a point. But let's just get started.
To land surrounded by water, the lovely island of Sicily, which looks on the map as though Italy were trying to kick it into Africa.
So the first thing you notice about Sicily, especially in the 1960s, which is when I suspect civilization peaked, if you look at all the little details, like if you look at all the little details in the building right here, if you look at the architecture, none of this was built by normies. Because normies in general, they don't contribute much. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a normie. There's nothing wrong with drinking some beer and falling asleep in front of the telly watching football or something. It's just that that's a very neurotypical thing to do. And what that leads to is generally a life that is unremarkable. No one will ever remember the vast majority of the people that have lived. Supposedly there's been about 100 billion humans who've ever lived. How many of their names do you know? It's never the normies. The people that you remember are people like Diogenes, people like Pythagoras, Plato. I know I'm just naming Greeks, but emperors, especially. And being an emperor isn't sufficient. You have to be like Marcus Aurelius. Is probably by far one of the most known Roman emperor after Julius Caesar. But Julius Caesar was known more for just conquering a bunch of land, whereas Marcus Aurelius was known for being a philosopher king. These people were remarkable in various ways, but they weren't particularly neurotypical. Even if you aren't necessarily very neurodivergent, if you're put in a position of being the emperor of a known world, you're probably going to start thinking in ways that are different to most people. And of course, a lot of the emperors, their position was hereditary, so it is possible that I have a suspicion that many emperors were actually kind of autistic, kind of neurodivergent, and they, of course, ensure that this will continue by handing off their thrones to their descendants, or their throne to their descendants. But let's continue watching for a minute, because there's something else that I want to show you.
But don't let the map fool you. Nobody in his right mind would want Sicily to be anywhere but exactly where it is, in the middle of the Mediterranean, halfway between the ancient civilizations of Europe and the wild splendor of Africa.
Of Europe? Man, this accent is quite fascinating. It's that transatlantic sort of 50s, 60s accent that's lost now.
And on reflection, the atmosphere of Sicily is halfway between the two as well. Sicily was the first country in the world to become a Roman province 22 centuries ago. One of the snags about living in the middle is that you're always getting taken over. Before the Romans, it was the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Carthaginians.
I mean, look at this. Can you imagine the person who went, right, we're going to go up this hill and we're going to build all this beautiful architecture on top of a hill. We're going to have, I assume this is sort of a theater. It looks like some sort of auditorium. We're going to build it right here. And we're going to suffer, and we're going to build these columns. Like, the people who built, like, there's some point in history, some autist, probably some Greek guy, decided, we're going to build these beautiful columns. I know this is Roman, but the Romans borrowed a lot of architecture from the Greeks. Someone decided, hey, we're going to build these archways, and we're going to stack these rocks. We're going to carve these natural resources into blocks, and we're going to build these archways. Now, bear in mind, they didn't need to have this. This is completely over the top. You don't need to have this. And yet they did.
Carthaginians, and later on the Saracens and the Normans. But they all left riches behind them, and of course descendants who have their own ways of remembering.
Look at that. Look at the amount of detail in these columns, especially here.
Remembering their ancestors, including the local art of puppetry.
Look at this painting. Again, here's a perfect example, right? Look at these arches above the doors. These are called pediments. You can have, in Greece, typically you have triangular pediments. You can have circular pediments. This is an unnecessary detail, and yet it gives this architecture almost a divine quality. When you go visit any European city, you don't go to the financial district to look at glass cubes. You go to the historic district. You go to see stuff like this. You go to see tall, unnecessarily tall doors made of hardwood with beautiful decorations and a huge amount of detail built by people who had way more pride than we do. And I am aware that I'm filming this in the dark wearing a hoodie. I am aware of the hypocrisy here.
Sicily is proud of its colourful handicrafts, and each area has its own
There's
speciality.
something coming up that I really want to show you.
Here in Taormina on the east coast, it is painted carts. These particular ones are very old, from a museum collection, but the art is still
Look at this, man. Look at this cart.
practiced.
This is where a civilization really, you can just have a cart made of the most basic wood, and it's just the cart, and that's fine. However, it takes a certain kind of autism to decorate something that is utilitarian in this fashion. And this isn't exclusive to Sicily. Pretty much everywhere in Europe, there was a time where people put so much more into, people cared so much more about aesthetics. Actually, let me show you. So there's, sure. So there's this village in Romania. It's like an open air museum that was reconstructed, and they basically picked up pieces from different villages, I believe, and they constructed this model village of what Romanian villages used to look like. Look at the amount of, can we just see the architecture, please? Like some of these houses, they have gateways. They have these archways when you enter the property. I've been here in person. It kind of feels like walking through a Witcher village. Trying to find, look at this detail. Why, no normal person decides to do this. It takes an artist to go and build. I'm actually trying to find a specific I mean, even look at the patterns in the tapestry. You don't have to have these patterns here. They don't have to exist. You could just have some cloth here, and it would serve the exact same purpose. And yet they had intricate tapestries. Right? Even here, why is there what? Because this is done by hand. Right? Why was all this detail? Look at this. This is not what beds look like now. Like beds look like IKEA beds look nothing like this. This was all done by hand. And this was all done by autists, people who cared enough to go, do you know what? We're not just gonna sleep on some wooden boards. We should have some pride in ourselves, in our existence, and we should have some beautiful things surround us. We should have something that brings us closer to the divine. Like look at this. Look at all this detail in the furniture. And it was initially some autist that came up with the concept and the design. And then there were some other autists who physically built the items. And I have a sneaking suspicion, I don't have any evidence for this, but I have a sneaking suspicion that perhaps autism or neurodivergence of some kind was maybe a lot more common. I don't know if it's simply a case of, with the Industrial Revolution, humans have lost the sense of pride of being human. It's possible that there's something to that. I don't know if it's the fact that, we've basically been treated like we've been treated almost like at an industrial scale, because this is before apartment blocks, right? There came a point technologically where it was more practical to put a bunch of people into concrete cubes and just shove them in there, and that was more efficient. But I think that stripped us of something that these people were not stripped of. These people lived in a different world. They lived in a world where there were far fewer people, and the people themselves were not treated at an industrial scale like cattle. And I think that bred a kind of neurodivergence. I think that these people that we're looking at were fundamentally different from most people today. I think that me and you and the people who watch this kind of content, I think that we're more similar to these people than most people are. Than most of the people that we live, or are they restoring it, or what's happening? Okay, I think they're doing even more work on it. So I think that there's something about the people that lived in these sort of places that we have more in common with, we as autists, as Linux people. I think we have something in common with them that we don't have in common with most people today. And I think that that's fundamentally why most people like us, why we tend to be a little bit nihilistic, a little bit, can't think of the term right now, we tend not to be the biggest fans of people in general. I don't think the problem is with us. I think the problem is that we are surrounded by people who, it's this kind of stuff. Right? This is like at the gate. This is at the entrance into someone's property. Look at this, bro. Like, you have to have so much pride in yourself, in your family, to build stuff like this. Because they didn't have to have that. They could have just had some wood, or not even had anything. But instead, they had all this detail, all this beauty, which I think you and I can appreciate, but most people cannot. The average person is happy to live in a concrete box and just stare at a screen all day. And I'm not criticizing minimalism. I'm a huge fan of minimalism. But there's a difference. Minimalism is just not having a bunch of useless stuff, right? This is something else. This is a level of beauty, a level of respect for nature, for the divine, that simply doesn't exist in today's society. People are happy to be packed into massive apartment blocks and pay silly amounts of money for the privilege. I would much rather live somewhere like this. I still like computers, obviously, but you can have both. You can live in a more rural place. You can have more of this stuff, and you can have a laptop that you work from, and you can still enjoy all this stuff. You don't have to live in. Sorry, the video's completely gone off the rails. Look, it's called Boomer Ranting in the Woods. It's fine. Like, I would love to live somewhere like this, where, assuming that it's isolated enough from the modern world that the people living here, and this is just a museum, this is not an actual village, but there are places like this all over Europe, where the people there live close enough to nature that they are, as a result, they are more neurodivergent. And I suspect that there is a connection. I think that there is a connection between neurodivergence and living closer to nature. And I think that the further away you live from nature, the more you isolate yourself from beauty, from details like these. I think that your thinking in your mind changes. I think that you become more neurotypical. I don't think that neurodivergence or being autistic, I don't think it's a medical condition. I don't think it's a problem even. I think the reason why we stand out and why we appear to be so strange to most people is because we are closer to the people that lived in these sort of places mentally than the average person. I think that the average has just changed. And we have ended up in a position where psychologists would have had no choice but to consider most people neurotypical. I mean, that's just by definition, right? Because the population has changed and people have changed. And so back when people lived in these places, I think that we were the neurotypical ones. I think that we were the ones that were sane and well adjusted. And the people that are neurotypical today, I think that they were the rarity, if they even existed at all. I mean, look at this. Why would you put this much effort into creating something if like this, unless you're neuroatypical? This is not what a normal person today would do. A normal person today, if they had to do this by hand, they just wouldn't. If they were forced to build this, they would just put, because part of the reason why they had this stuff on the walls was for insulation. This is insulation, right? This is why you see this in like Russia. Whenever you look at footage in like communist apartment blocks, you'll see people having carpets on the walls. And the reason was typically because they would offer extra insulation. This is their insulation, bro. Look at how much effort they put in the insulation. These are not normal people. They are like us. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.